Well, Barbara was co-authoring the work together with Sjauke Mau and Dovka Bai, and this is like a work in progress, but I'm proud to present it today. And because it's a work in progress, of course, we have more questions left after we've done this empirical part than we have answers. But still, I will be speaking about content bias, and our biggest wish is to understand how media make people understand what they want them to understand. How does this manipulation work? Although we have not completely managed to answer the questions, we still had a chance at least to understand the mechanics of building these manipulative messages. And I will focus on this talk, and we focus on this in our work, on one specific event and descriptions of this event, report of this event in different media, in different countries, in different languages. And we look here at so-called content bias, is how power elites create strategic narratives, and those strategic narratives are implemented in media frames, in different sorts of media frames, and those different implementations of those media frames are distributed over different channels. And the goal of that is actually to influence the population. Well, the event is the event that I will be focusing on is it has happened 8 years ago, actually, in Odessa. There were demonstrations, protests against the government and in support of government, and there were many different things happening on those days in different parts of the country. But one specific thing during all those events has been taken as a very important information resource by Russian media and foreign media for propaganda purposes. And it was the fire in the trade union's house on the 2nd of May 2014, where about 50 people died on that day for different reasons. Well, and this is already the example how it can be framed. Ukrainian rightists burned alive 39 at Odessa trade union buildings. Is it true or not? Well, while we were looking at our data set, which is in English, German, Polish, and Russian, everything just about that event, we wanted to understand, and we figured out a little bit at which levels this content bias can be implemented. And it's not just about words, and not just about like input and output, but there is also something like emotion bias. So different emotions are specific for different languages, how they are framed in those texts. And also the content bias itself, so how it is framed, it's also very specific to the language and to the target audience. And I will explain later, just on the next slides, how it was, how we identified that it is. What we see as potential application case for this sort of work is that if we see like messages or texts produced by media, when we have reports about political conflicts, for instance, then we have two different parties, and those two different parties speak differently about themselves and the others. So we have like a matrix. Party A speaks about themselves and about the others, and Party B speaks about themselves and about the others. And if you have just this sort of tags, different representations of the identities of the others, we want to know who is who. So who is speaking about whom? That would be interesting to know. That just to warn, maybe to make the audience aware of, to point the reader that this is like slanted in this direction and this is slanted in the other direction. A few key dates about our data set. Well, it's a small data set. We have in total 67 texts in 4 languages, and the distribution over years and over languages is totally different. There is no like homogeneous picture. We just got how many we could. And what is interesting to see is that there are a lot of reports just after the event, 2014, and there is like it's going down. It has been somehow processed and maybe also forgotten, but suddenly years later it comes up again. So there are more publications about that, And even in 2022, there are still publications about Odessa trade unions also, although there is actually a war already on that territory, so actually there are more important things happening right now. But no, we still have to speak about that. In this dataset in 4 languages, we wanted first do microanalytic work, understand how those things are built, basically. And at the end, because we wanted to have this automation at the end, like automated classification by this AB speaker, we want to have like a formal model of that, and we want to understand what sort of annotation we need for such corpora in order to make this operational. But this is like a question, still a question. What we managed to do is to start this formalization, and this is what I will show you. So we will analyze the event structure, and we will also look at categorization work, a membership categorization, how those parties A and B call each other, for instance. But what we're doing is like doing the same for each part of the event, which labels, which attributes, actions are used for which part. But I will show it here just for one thing, because it will be just too much, and I will not manage to do it in 15 minutes. Well, if we look at the event structure, we figure out that we have like 2 different parties and they get it together. And then there are like the people, one person dies from one party, then the other people die from the other party. And it is in the text, it's written that police doesn't intervene. And then one party moves to a square, and then someone sets the house afire. We don't know whom, because reports differ in this point. So who is actually fault that people died, that the house was burning, and still there was no intervention, neither from police nor from fire brigade, and there were attempts to save lives of people. So people tried to save their own lives, or the other party of the conflict tried to help them, but on the other hand also tried to kill them. And finally, there are descriptions how police and fire brigade show up and start dealing with this event, like getting it under control. And then after the event, there is like dealing with this shock and death. And later, not just after the event, but later, some years later, there are reports about investigations, how they failed and how they're going, and there is a lot of critics. So what we were doing is like we had, for each of those points, we had from each paper the labels and the attributes and the category labels. And here I'm showing only the descriptions, that just examples, a few examples of descriptions in different languages used for those parties of the conflict. Well, what is really clearly visible is that A speaks about themselves, of course, in a more positive way than about the others, B the same. What is also clearly analyzable is that local cultural references are different. If in Russian it's more like Second World War references on the Russian territory, in Poland, in the Polish part, it's compared to Auschwitz, which is like a totally different thing, but people died there in a fire too. It's like the only common thing, but this is enough. This one small thing is enough to compare it to Auschwitz. I wouldn't say that like English reports would be more objective than Russian ones. They were all polarized, and negative and positive labels are found in both, or in all 4 languages for both parties of the conflict, and the pattern is the same. So we speak positive about ourselves, but not about the others, and we make the others look very, very bad, comparing them with Nazis and separatists and whoever. The data set is public, so you can go to GitHub and download it. I will give the link is in the presentation, so if you want to use it, we can do that. So the next step that we are now in the process of doing, but I can already speak about it. We looked at this categorization, categorization work that those authors are doing in these papers, and we try to understand how this manipulation happens. And for that, we look at this, well, I call it grid, but it's not a grid actually, at the classification of features of each category proposed by Freiberg and Freeberg in their paper. And what was important thing to understand is this technical manipulation side. It was a difference between this constitutive type and occasional feature. So if you have a constitutive feature, you see that, I don't know, a woman feeds a kid with a bottle, you know that the person is a mother probably of that kid. So the activity is enough to categorize the person. This is like the constitutive feature. Tied features are if there is a particular context, and in this context you have an activity and you can conclude about the category. And occasional features do not give you this sufficient information. It can be that through the observation of the activity you can conclude about the category, but it's very unlikely. And this difference is actually the main point in this manipulation work, as I understand it. We try to formalize it just to use something that cannot understand when you just look at it. So we used letters and some alphabets just to put it somehow in mathematical formula. So I think that it can be helpful to represent it in this way, that we have like a set of features, constitutive features, and a set of tied features, and a set of occasional features, and we have a category label, some category label. And what we can do with that is that if we have a comparison like this, many other Belarusian civic activists have posted illustration, also known as Odessa Khatin. So this event, this fire in the Trade Union House, is compared in Belarus to a very dramatic event at the time of the Second World War that happened on a Belarusian territory, where a special Nazi brigade was acting in a particularly cruel way. They basically put all inhabitants of a village in a house and set it afire and shot everyone who tried to escape. And the only common feature is that people died in a fire. There was a house and it was burning and people died in a fire. And for the Odessa part, it's like, it's not completely true. Okay, people died in a fire, but no one forced them to go there. No one locked the door. That wasn't true. But there is something that is like, it characterizes it, but it doesn't make it recognizable just from that activity. So it's like an occasional feature. But through that comparison, it is made like constitutive feature. And that's why when you speak about Odessa Trade Union's house, you speak about Khatin, and the other way around. You sort of make them the same just by making an occasional feature constitutive. But this work can be also done in the other direction, the other way around. In this case, it's a translation. No, it's not just. It's an English original text. In this case, Council of Europe was blamed for supporting Kiev regime in their non-acting on investigation. So, like the support of human rights and promotion of democracy is like declared on the website of Council of Europe, and this is their obligation to protect human rights and the rule of law in Europe. But at the same time, they just support this Kiev regime who just do not punish those far-right militias who killed people, basically, and they like violate their obligations, and those obligations are constitutive features. And in this case, it's like exactly the opposite. So the constitutive feature becomes an optional, and the image of the institution is changed. So what? As I said, it's a work in progress. So we still are working on the data. We still are working on that completion of the formalization. We are still interested in how to annotate this sort of data in order to automatically do this work that we are doing right now manually. But I think what is the most important thing that we have to keep in our minds working with language and technology is that we have to take the language seriously without transforming the object of our studies. And without saying, okay, this is non-standard, this is standard, and this is like a bad translation. It is like it is, and we try to understand how it is done in the language as it is, and not somehow do it normalized first. This is it from my side. Thank you for your attention.